The grand chandelier shimmered above the dining hall like a constellation trapped in crystal, and the scent of roasted meats, freshly baked bread, and aromatic spices filled the air with a promise of comfort and warmth. Yet tension lingered heavier than any perfume could mask. Jasmine had always known her place in this sprawling white mansion, a place where gold-plated fixtures gleamed brighter than the smiles of the people she served, a place where she worked tirelessly, often invisible despite the countless hours she poured into every corner of the home. Tonight, however, she felt a peculiar nervousness simmering within her chest, a nervousness she couldn't quite name. Tonight, she was cooking for the billionaire himself, Mr. Carrington and his family, his discerning eyes that rarely showed warmth or approval, and his son, little Timothy, who always seemed to observe rather than speak. Jasmine had spent the better part of the day in the mansion's pristine kitchen, carefully chopping vegetables, marinating meats with secret spices passed down from her grandmother, and humming quietly to herself in rhythm with the clatter of pans and knives. Every movement was calculated, every step measured, because in this house, perfection wasn't just a goal, it was a demand. By late afternoon, the dinner table was laid out in all its opulent glory, silverware polished until it gleamed, crystal glasses aligned with precision, and porcelain plates that seemed far too delicate to ever touch a knife or fork. Jasmine had prepared a meal she knew could silence even the harshest critics: roasted herb chicken, mashed sweet potatoes with just the right balance of butter and cinnamon, sautéed greens glistening with garlic and olive oil, and a dessert of pecan pie that carried a hint of vanilla and caramelized sugar that made mouths water before the first bite. Yet as she carefully carried the tray of main courses to the table, she felt the weight of the invisible eyes upon her, the subtle judgment in every step, the unspoken assumption that she, a black maid in this mansion, could never truly create something worthy of praise from the Carringtons. "Jasmine," Mr. Carrington's deep voice cut through the quiet hum of the kitchen, "is everything ready?" "I expect nothing less than perfection tonight." The tone of his voice was smooth, refined, and yet sharp, like a blade hidden beneath silk. Jasmine nodded respectfully, placing the trays down with hands that trembled ever so slightly. "Yes, sir. Dinner is ready." She kept her eyes lowered, feeling the weight of 1,000 unspoken rules pressing down on her, reminding her that a single mistake could unravel the hours of effort she had poured into this meal. As the family filed into the dining room, the sound of laughter and casual chatter filled the space, masking the tension Jasmine felt knotting her stomach. The Carringtons were a picture of polished elegance. Mr. Carrington with his tailored suit and perfectly combed hair, Mrs. Carrington with her pearls and delicate silk dress, and Timothy, their young son, who seemed far older than his years in the way he observed every detail, every glance, every movement around him. Jasmine set the dishes before them, careful to arrange each plate just so, the steam rising in delicate wisps that carried the aroma straight to their senses. Mr. Carrington picked up his fork, eyes narrowing slightly as he took a bite of the chicken, chewing slowly, as if savoring the moment before passing judgment. Jasmine's heart pounded violently against her ribcage, each beat echoing the fear and anxiety she felt. A long silence stretched across the table, thick and heavy, until Mr. Carrington's voice finally broke the quiet. "Jasmine," he said, the words dripping with disdain, "I don't know what you've done to this chicken, but it lacks flavor. It's bland." The words hit Jasmine like a cold, sharp slap. She forced herself to remain composed, swallowing the lump that rose in her throat. She had expected criticism, yes, but the cruelty of it cut deeper than she had imagined. She tried to explain, but no words could justify the care and tradition she had poured into each dish. Her hands itched to retreat, to escape the judgmental gaze of the man who seemed to hold all the power in this room. But she remained standing, dignified, invisible yet present, waiting for the humiliation to end. Then Timothy, the young boy who had been silently observing, picked up his fork with a quiet determination that contrasted sharply with his father's harshness. He took a bite of the chicken, closed his eyes and chewed slowly, savoring the flavors in a way that startled Jasmine. For a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath. His eyes opened, locking onto hers with a sincerity that pierced the tension like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. "This is amazing," he said simply, his voice steady and earnest. "The chicken, the potatoes, everything. It tastes incredible. "Who taught you to cook like this?" The room fell silent. Mr. Carrington's fork hovered in the air, frozen as his jaw tightened, and Mrs. Carrington's eyes widened in surprise. Jasmine felt her chest swell with a mixture of relief and disbelief. Timothy's words had done what hers could not. He had spoken the truth that resonated beyond prejudice and expectation. The silence stretched not in judgment but in stunned acknowledgement. "Timothy," Mr. Carrington finally said, his voice low, almost hesitant, "what did you just say?" The sharpness in his tone had softened slightly, replaced with confusion and perhaps a trace of unease. Timothy looked directly at him, unwavering. "I said it tastes amazing, and I mean it. Jasmine, you should teach Dad a thing or two about cooking." The comment, innocent as it was, carried the weight of justice. In that moment, Jasmine saw the beginning of a crack in the armor of arrogance that had so long defined Mr. Carrington. She smiled faintly, not out of pride, but because the young boy had done something she could not, a gesture that reminded her that goodness and honesty could still speak louder than wealth, prejudice, or status. As Jasmine quietly retreated to the kitchen, her heart still racing, she realized that tonight was not just about a meal. It was about recognition, respect, and the subtle power of truth spoken with courage. Timothy's words had shifted the energy of the room, and though she did not yet know what consequences might follow, she felt a strange warmth blossom inside her, a reassurance that no matter how harsh the world might be, sincerity and talent could never be truly ignored. Jasmine returned to the kitchen, her hands still trembling slightly, but now with a new sense of purpose. The faint clatter of dishes and the scent of herbs filled the air, but she barely noticed it. Timothy's words had shifted something inside her, a spark of hope that she had not felt in years, working under the watchful, often cruel eyes of the Carringtons. She could hear faint murmurs from the dining room, the low hum of surprise and confusion, as Mr. Carrington processed what his son had just said. She paused for a moment, taking a deep breath, letting herself feel the warmth of small victory. Meanwhile, in the dining room, Mr. Carrington sat stiffly, his fork untouched, eyes narrowed in thought. He was a man used to control, used to having his opinions dominate any room he entered. And yet his own son had just challenged that authority, not in defiance but with honesty. It was a subtle, dangerous kind of rebellion that rattled him more than any argument or protest ever could. He watched Timothy quietly, seeing the confidence in the boy's gaze, and a pang of unease settled deep in his chest. Timothy, who had always been silent at dinner, who had observed the world around him with quiet intelligence, had chosen to speak, and it had disrupted the carefully maintained balance of power in this house. Mrs. Carrington shifted uncomfortably in her seat. She was used to a life of elegance, order, and superficial smiles that never quite reached her eyes. She had always relied on her husband's judgment and her son's compliance to maintain the household's image of perfection. Yet tonight something felt different. Timothy's approval of Jasmine's cooking had bypassed all social hierarchies, bypassed the rigid rules of class and wealth, and touched something real. Her eyes softened slightly as she looked at the young boy, a mother's pride mingling with surprise at his honesty. Back in the kitchen, Jasmine busied herself with clearing dishes, trying to steady her racing thoughts. She had learned long ago not to expect kindness from the Carringtons, yet Timothy's words reminded her of why she had worked so hard to perfect her craft. Every dish, every meal, every small act of care was her way of asserting her worth in a world that too often overlooked it. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind, reminding her that skill and dignity could never be taken from someone, no matter how harsh the judgment of others. Suddenly, the kitchen door opened, and Timothy stepped inside quietly. Jasmine looked up, startled, but he smiled gently, carrying a small plate with a slice of the pecan pie she had prepared. "I wanted to try dessert," he said softly, holding the plate out to her. "I know you probably didn't get to enjoy it yourself, and I wanted you to taste it too." Jasmine hesitated, a lump forming in her throat. No child, especially in a house like this, had ever extended such thoughtfulness toward her. She reached out and took the plate, her hands brushing against his. The gesture, small as it was, carried a profound sense of connection, a bridge across the divide of status and expectation. She tasted the pie, savoring the familiar flavors, and for a moment she felt seen, not as a maid, not as someone beneath notice, but as a person with talent, heart, and worth. Timothy leaned against the counter, watching her with a quiet intensity. "Dad didn't understand," he said finally, his voice tinged with frustration. "He thinks everything has to be expensive or complicated to be good, but this is better than anything I've ever tasted at his fancy dinners." Jasmine smiled faintly, appreciating the boy's honesty and courage. "You're very kind to say that," she replied softly. "Cooking is about love, patience, and care. That's what makes it special." Just then, a sharp voice interrupted them. Mr. Carrington had entered the kitchen, his eyes flashing with a mix of anger and confusion. "Timothy," he barked, "what are you doing here?" "This is no place for you to interfere." Timothy stood his ground, holding the plate of pie firmly. "I just wanted to show Jasmine that I appreciate her cooking," he said calmly, his voice steady and unwavering. "She deserves more than criticism for something she's put her heart into." Mr. Carrington's face darkened, a storm of pride and authority clashing with a growing realization that he could not command his son's approval through wealth or intimidation. He had spent years building an empire, accumulating power, and controlling the environment around him, but he had never faced a challenge like this, an innocent, sincere judgment from a child that exposed the emptiness behind his authority. Jasmine watched silently, her heart heavy with anxiety, yet secretly proud of the boy who had dared to speak the truth. She understood the risks. Challenging a man like Mr. Carrington, even indirectly, could have consequences for both of them. But Timothy's courage reminded her that sometimes the smallest voices carried the loudest truths. A tense silence filled the room, broken only by the faint ticking of the antique clock on the wall. Finally, Mr. Carrington spoke, his tone measured but tight. "Timothy, I suppose you enjoyed the meal. But you must understand, cooking for this household requires more than just effort. It requires skill, tradition, and adherence to expectations." Timothy shook his head gently. "It's not about that, Dad. It's about how it makes people feel. Jasmine made me feel happy, cared for, and full. That's what matters." Jasmine felt a warmth spread through her chest, a mixture of pride, relief, and gratitude. The boy had not only defended her work, but had articulated a truth that the Carringtons had long ignored. Value was not determined by wealth, status, or outward appearances. It was determined by heart, effort, and sincerity. As Mr. Carrington turned to leave the kitchen, still processing the exchange, Timothy glanced at Jasmine with a smile that spoke volumes. "Thank you," he said quietly. "You didn't just cook a meal, you showed me something important tonight." Jasmine nodded, blinking back tears she refused to let fall. She had spent her life serving others, often unnoticed, but for the first time, she felt truly recognized, truly valued, and truly human. That night, as she returned to her small quarters above the kitchen, Jasmine lay awake staring at the ceiling, thinking about Timothy's words, about the subtle but profound impact of honesty, courage, and kindness. She realized that this night was only the beginning. There would be challenges, criticism, and judgment to face, but with allies like Timothy, unexpected though he was, she felt a newfound strength. The walls of the Carrington mansion might have been built from wealth, power, and expectation, but tonight a small crack had formed, and through it, light had begun to shine. The following morning, Jasmine arrived in the kitchen before the sun had even begun to rise, the mansion still shrouded in a sleepy golden haze. The scent of fresh coffee and polished wood mixed with the lingering aroma of last night's dinner, creating a strange sense of anticipation. Though Timothy's words from the previous night had warmed her heart, she knew that Mr. Carrington's simmering anger was far from over. Wealth, power, and pride often made a man blind, but sometimes it made him dangerous, and she had learned long ago to respect that danger. As Jasmine began chopping vegetables and preparing the ingredients for breakfast, she couldn't shake the memory of Timothy's quiet admiration. It was unusual, even remarkable, to encounter someone so young yet so perceptive, someone willing to see past the hierarchy that had dictated her life for years. She felt a flicker of hope, but also a shadow of anxiety. She knew that in the Carrington household, any small victory could quickly become a new battlefield. Just then, the kitchen door swung open, and Mr. Carrington entered, his polished shoes clicking against the marble floor. His presence alone made the room feel colder, heavier. Jasmine paused mid-motion, her knife hovering above the cutting board. "Good morning, sir," she said carefully, keeping her voice steady. He ignored her greeting, instead walking past her with measured steps, his eyes scanning the kitchen with sharp precision. "I heard about last night," he said finally, his voice tight with controlled irritation. "Your performance at dinner." The word performance hung in the air, loaded with disdain. Jasmine's stomach tightened. She had expected this confrontation sooner or later. "I just cooked the meal, sir," she replied evenly. "The ingredients and techniques are the same ones I've used for years. The flavors are traditional, balanced, and carefully prepared." Mr. Carrington's jaw clenched. "You see, Jasmine, tradition and care are meaningless if the results do not meet the standards of this household. You may think you are skilled, but skill without recognition is nothing." He paused, his gaze piercing hers. "Do you understand what I'm saying?" Jasmine met his stare, refusing to shrink under his authority. "I understand, sir, but I also believe that recognition should not come solely from wealth or power. A meal can be judged by taste, effort, and heart, not the prestige of those consuming it." For a moment there was silence. Then Mr. Carrington's lips curled into a thin, tight line. "You speak boldly for someone in your position," he said coldly. "I am warning you, Jasmine. Boldness can be dangerous." Before Jasmine could respond, the sound of soft footsteps interrupted the tension. Timothy appeared in the doorway, his school uniform crisp, his tie slightly askew. He carried a small notebook in his hands, his expression unreadable. "Dad," he said quietly but firmly, "Jasmine didn't do anything wrong. Last night she made everyone happy. Isn't that what matters?" Mr. Carrington turned sharply toward his son, his eyes darkening. "Timothy, this is not a matter for childish arguments," he said, his voice rising slightly. "You are too young to understand the responsibilities that come with wealth and influence." Timothy squared his shoulders, unwavering. "I may be young, Dad, but I know good food when I taste it, and I know when someone's heart is in the right place. Jasmine's food and she herself deserve respect, not criticism." The room fell into a tense quiet once again, the air thick with unspoken conflict. Jasmine felt a wave of relief at Timothy's words, but also knew that this confrontation would not end peacefully. Mr. Carrington, proud and stubborn, would not easily relinquish his control or admit any fault, and Jasmine had learned to navigate that dangerous terrain carefully. That afternoon, Jasmine prepared a new meal for the family lunch. She worked quietly, methodically, each motion deliberate, as if the act of cooking itself could assert her dignity in a world that constantly sought to diminish it. As she plated the dishes, she felt the weight of expectation pressing down on her, the invisible eyes of the Carringtons assessing, judging, and anticipating her next move. When the family gathered around the table, Mr. Carrington's scrutiny was intense. He picked up his fork and took a bite of Jasmine's carefully prepared roast, chewing slowly, as if the act itself were a test. Jasmine held her breath. Timothy, sitting beside his father, watched with a calm intensity, his eyes darting between his father and Jasmine. Then, unexpectedly, Mr. Carrington's hand trembled slightly, and he set down his fork. He looked at Jasmine, his expression unreadable. "This is quite good," he admitted, his voice begrudging but honest. Jasmine felt a flicker of triumph, but she did not allow herself to smile. She knew better than to celebrate too soon. Acknowledgement from Mr. Carrington was a rare victory, but it did not erase the constant tension or the possibility of backlash. After lunch, Jasmine retreated to the kitchen, exhausted but resolute. Timothy followed her quietly. "So you're amazing," he said softly, leaning against the counter. "Dad doesn't know how to show it, but he can't ignore you forever. You've already changed his perspective." Jasmine shook her head gently. "It's not just about changing him, Timothy. It's about showing the value of effort, skill, and heart. That's what matters, whether he admits it or not." As the day wore on, Jasmine sensed a subtle shift in the household. The Carringtons moved with slightly more caution, aware perhaps that their usual dominance was being quietly challenged. Timothy's admiration for her grew, not just for her skill in the kitchen, but for her courage in the face of scrutiny and prejudice. That evening, after dinner, Jasmine returned to her quarters, reflecting on the events of the day. She realized that her cooking had become more than a job. It was a tool for change, a way to challenge assumptions and break through barriers built by wealth, pride, and prejudice. Timothy's support gave her hope, but she also knew that the path ahead would be fraught with challenges. Mr. Carrington's pride and influence could not be underestimated, and any misstep could provoke his wrath. Yet, for the first time in her life within the Carrington mansion, Jasmine felt a sense of agency, a quiet power that came from her dedication, her skill, and the undeniable truth that talent and heart could not be ignored. She made a silent promise to herself. No matter what obstacles lay ahead, she would continue to assert her worth, not through confrontation, but through excellence, perseverance, and unwavering dignity. The following week, the Carringtons announced a grand dinner party in their opulent home, inviting business associates, socialites, and distant relatives. Jasmine learned of the event early in the morning, the household buzzing with preparations. This dinner would not only be a showcase of their wealth and status, but also a test for her, a moment where any misstep could be magnified in front of dozens of influential eyes. Her heart pounded as she walked through the kitchen, surveying the ingredients and imagining the meticulously arranged dining room. She had to ensure that every dish, every garnish, every detail was perfect. Failure tonight was unthinkable. Mr. Carrington approached her as she organized the ingredients, his presence more intimidating than usual. "Jasmine," he said sharply, "tonight is critical. This dinner is not merely for taste. It's a display of excellence, refinement, and social sophistication. One mistake and I will not tolerate it." His eyes bore into hers with a cold intensity that made her stomach twist. She nodded, keeping her voice calm. "Understood, sir. I will ensure everything is flawless." Timothy, who had been quietly observing from the doorway, stepped forward. "Dad," he said softly but firmly, "I trust Jasmine. She knows what she's doing. Let her handle this dinner her way." Mr. Carrington's eyes flickered with a mixture of irritation and surprise. His son had grown bolder in recent days, defending Jasmine and challenging his father's authority in subtle but significant ways. Mr. Carrington turned on his heel, muttering under his breath, leaving the kitchen with a stormy silence. Jasmine exhaled slowly, steadying herself. The kitchen became her battlefield, each sizzling pan, simmering sauce, and precise chopper weapon against the judgment and prejudice that had long haunted her. She worked tirelessly, her hands moving with the precision of a surgeon, guided by years of practice, passion, and the quiet knowledge that tonight could change the course of her life. By the time the first guests arrived, the dining room was a spectacle of grandeur. Crystal chandeliers reflected light across polished silverware, the table adorned with fresh flowers, and the aroma of Jasmine's cooking drifting tantalizingly through the air. Guests murmured appreciatively, commenting on the elegance of the presentation, unaware of the woman who had prepared the meal with such care and love. The first course was served, Jasmine's herb-crusted salmon, perfectly seared, accompanied by a delicate lemon butter sauce. She watched discreetly from the kitchen entrance, as guests took their first bites, holding her breath. Gasps of delight and murmurs of approval began to ripple through the room. Timothy, sitting beside his father, gave Jasmine a subtle thumbs up, his eyes shining with encouragement. Mr. Carrington, however, was a different matter. He observed in silence, his face impassive, his fork poised but unmoving. Jasmine felt the familiar tension tighten around her chest. She knew that no amount of praise from the guests would matter if her employer remained unsatisfied. But Timothy's presence reminded her that she was not entirely alone. The main course followed, roasted chicken with a medley of vegetables and Jasmine's signature sweet potato mash. The flavors were bold, balanced, and rich with the warmth of her culinary heritage. Timothy eagerly tasted the chicken, then glanced at his father. "Dad, you need to try this. Jasmine's cooking is amazing. Just taste it." Mr. Carrington's hand trembled slightly as he lifted his fork. The guests fell into a hush, sensing a shift in the room's energy. The billionaire took a deliberate bite, his eyes narrowing as he chewed slowly. Jasmine's heart raced. She had prepared for this moment for years, but nothing could have fully braced her for the scrutiny of someone so powerful and proud. Finally, Mr. Carrington swallowed, the silence deafening. Then he cleared his throat. "This is remarkable," he admitted, his voice restrained but undeniably sincere. Jasmine exhaled quietly, relief washing over her in waves. It was more than just recognition. It was validation of years of dedication, skill, and perseverance. The dessert course, pecan pie with a caramel drizzle was met with applause. Timothy beamed, whispering a quiet thank you to Jasmine, who smiled faintly, trying not to let the emotion show. For the first time, the house felt less like a prison and more like a stage where her talent could shine. Yet, beneath the applause and compliments, Jasmine sensed an undercurrent of tension. Mr. Carrington's pride was still intact, and while he had acknowledged her skill, he had not yet relinquished control over her position in the household. Jasmine knew this was only the beginning. There would be tests, challenges, and perhaps subtle attempts to undermine her. But Timothy's support, the guests' praise, and her own confidence formed a shield she had never possessed before. As the evening progressed, Jasmine quietly observed the dynamics of the room. Whispers of admiration for her cooking flowed among the guests, and Mr. Carrington's associates nodded approvingly at his excellent taste. Yet in his eyes lingered a shadow of unease, an unspoken acknowledgement that his son's approval and the household's praise could not be easily dismissed. After the dinner concluded, Timothy followed Jasmine into the kitchen, his expression a mixture of pride and concern. "You did it," he said softly. "Everyone loved it, even Dad." "Well, he finally admitted it." Jasmine smiled faintly, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "It wasn't easy, and it's not over yet. But tonight showed that skill, heart, and honesty can make a difference even here." Timothy's eyes sparkled with admiration. "You've changed the house, Jasmine. You've changed my dad, too, even if he won't say it outright." Jasmine's heart swelled with emotion, knowing that the boy's words carried a truth that went beyond any compliment or praise. She had begun to shift the balance in this household, using her talent and dignity as instruments of subtle revolution. As she cleaned the kitchen in the quiet aftermath of the party, Jasmine reflected on the evening's events. She realized that her cooking was more than sustenance. It was a statement, a means of asserting her value and integrity in a world that had often overlooked her. Timothy's unwavering support gave her courage, but she also understood that change was rarely immediate. Mr. Carrington's pride, influence, and stubbornness would continue to challenge her. Yet tonight had proven one undeniable truth. Her talent could not be ignored, and sometimes recognition came in the most unexpected ways, from the heart of a child who saw beyond wealth and power. The morning after the grand dinner party, Jasmine awoke before sunrise, the quiet of the mansion giving her a rare moment of solitude. Yet even in the calm, an uneasy feeling pressed against her chest. She knew Mr. Carrington would not accept last night's success without a test, a challenge designed to remind her of her place in the household. And true to form, shortly after breakfast, he summoned her to his study. The study was vast, lined with floor-to-ceiling books, rare artifacts, and imposing portraits of the Carrington lineage. Mr. Carrington stood by the massive oak desk, his posture rigid, eyes sharp as ever. "Jasmine," he said, voice low but controlled, "you impressed me at the dinner party. That much is undeniable." Jasmine's stomach tightened. Praise from him was rare, and she knew better than to relax. "However," he continued, pacing slowly, "impressing a room of socialites does not make one indispensable. Talent can be found anywhere, and effort without verification is meaningless. Therefore, I am giving you a challenge. Tomorrow a critic will arrive, a food reviewer whose opinion influences our reputation, our image, and the social circle in which we operate. He will dine on your cuisine, and if it does not meet the highest standard, you will face consequences." Jasmine's heart skipped a beat. A professional critic, a stranger with no allegiance to her, would judge her in a single sitting. The stakes were higher than ever. "I understand, sir," she replied calmly, hiding the tremor in her voice. "I will prepare the meal to the best of my ability." Mr. Carrington's lips curled slightly, a mix of amusement and challenge. "See that you do. I will be observing." His eyes lingered on hers, a silent warning. Failure was not an option. Jasmine nodded and left the study, her mind already racing through menus, techniques, and ingredients. The pressure was immense, but she felt a quiet determination. Timothy's words from the previous night echoed in her mind. "You've changed the house, Jasmine, and perhaps tonight she could change even more." The entire day in the kitchen was a whirlwind of preparation. Jasmine tested recipes, tasting sauces and adjusting seasonings with meticulous care. Every slice of vegetable, Every sprinkle of spice was deliberate. She imagined the critic's discerning eyes, envisioning the way he would scrutinize every dish. Jasmine refused to let fear dominate her. Instead, she transformed it into focus, each anxious heartbeat fueling her determination. When the critic arrived the next evening, Jasmine was ready. He was a stern man, impeccably dressed, with a notebook in hand and eyes that seemed to miss nothing. Timothy, ever the ally, sat beside his father at the dining table, watching Jasmine with quiet admiration. Guests and household staff alike held their breaths, aware that this meal would not only define Jasmine's reputation, but also her standing in the Carrington household. The first course was served, pan-seared scallops with a delicate citrus glaze. Jasmine's heart raced as the critic lifted his fork. He chewed slowly, jotting notes in his notebook, his expression unreadable. Timothy, sensing her tension, gave her a subtle nod of encouragement. Jasmine smiled faintly, grateful for his presence, and continued observing, ready to respond to the next round. The main course followed, roasted beef tenderloin with a reduction sauce, paired with her signature sweet potato mash and buttered asparagus. The critic's eyes flicked between the plate and his notes, every chew deliberate, every pause calculated. Jasmine's stomach tightened with each moment, the silence around the table growing heavier by the second. Finally, after the dessert course, her rich chocolate soufflé served with a hint of raspberry coulis, the critic set down his fork. The room seemed to hold its breath. Jasmine's hands clenched together, her mind racing with fear, anticipation, and hope. Timothy, sensing the tension, whispered quietly, "You can do this. I believe in you." The critic looked up, his eyes scanning the room, landing on Jasmine. A faint smile touched his lips. "This," he said slowly, deliberately, "is extraordinary. The balance of flavors, the technique, the heart. It's rare to find talent like this, someone who not only cooks with skill but imbues each dish with emotion." Gasps of astonishment echoed around the room. Mr. Carrington's face remained unreadable for a long moment. Then slowly, almost imperceptibly, his expression softened. Jasmine felt a surge of relief, tears pricking her eyes, but she blinked them away. This recognition was more than professional. It was personal validation of every sacrifice, every hour, every ounce of love she had poured into her work. Timothy beamed, leaning slightly toward her. "See," he whispered, "I told you." Jasmine nodded, a small, quiet smile forming. "Yes," she said softly, "you were right." Yet the night was not without consequences. Mr. Carrington, though outwardly restrained, retreated into the background, clearly processing his defeat in this quiet but undeniable battle of recognition. Jasmine realized that the road ahead would continue to challenge her, not because she lacked skill, but because power and pride were slow to bend. She had won this round, but the war for respect, dignity, and true acknowledgement was far from over. As the household quieted and Jasmine prepared to return to her quarters, Timothy approached. "Dad may not say it out loud," he murmured, "but you've earned your place here. And you've shown me that courage and heart matter more than wealth or status." Jasmine felt her chest tighten with gratitude. "Thank you, Timothy. That means more than anything in the world." She realized that her journey in the Carrington mansion was not simply about cooking or earning recognition. It was about asserting her humanity in a place where it had long been undervalued. Each meal, each interaction, each moment of courage built a foundation for change, not just in the household but in the people who lived there. And she knew that the final chapter of this struggle was approaching, one that would test not only her skill, but the very respect and dignity she had fought to claim. The following morning, the Carrington mansion was unusually quiet, as if the events of the past week had shifted the atmosphere in subtle but undeniable ways. Jasmine moved through the kitchen with a calm precision, preparing breakfast with the same care and attention she had brought to every meal since her first day. Yet beneath her composed exterior, her heart thrummed with anticipation. She knew that today would bring the ultimate test, not of her skill, but of her dignity, her place in the household, and the ability of a powerful man to recognize truth and value beyond status or prejudice. Timothy arrived in the kitchen first, his youthful energy a reassuring presence. "Good morning, Jasmine," he said softly, handing her a small cup of coffee. "Dad's been thinking a lot about what you've done this week. I think today might be the day he finally says it out loud. Jasmine smiled faintly, grateful for his unwavering support. Thank you, Timothy. Your belief in me has made all the difference. As the morning passed, guests began to arrive for another luncheon, this time a more private affair with key business associates and close family members. The Carringtons wanted to showcase their influence, their refinement, and most importantly, the household's apparent unity. Jasmine prepared each dish with meticulous care, her mind focused and her hands steady. She knew that her cooking was more than nourishment. It was a statement, a testament to her talent, perseverance, and heart. When the luncheon began, the tension was palpable. Mr. Carrington's eyes lingered on Jasmine with an intensity that made the air thick. But there was a subtle difference from before. The pride that had once manifested as cold disdain was now tempered with curiosity and perhaps even a reluctant respect. Jasmine felt it, and though she remained professional, she allowed herself a quiet sense of hope. The first course was served, an elegant salad with fresh greens, roasted nuts, and a delicate vinaigrette. Timothy, sitting beside his father, glanced at Jasmine and offered an encouraging nod. She returned the gesture with a small smile, grateful for his steady support. As the guests tasted the food, murmurs of appreciation began to ripple through the room. Jasmine's skill, so often overlooked or undervalued, was undeniable. Then came the main course, her roasted herb chicken, accompanied by buttery vegetables and her signature sweet potato mash. Timothy watched closely as his father took a bite. For a long moment, Mr. Carrington said nothing, his expression unreadable. Jasmine felt her chest tighten with anxiety. This was the moment she had feared and hoped for all at once, the moment when the billionaire's pride would either crumble or assert itself in full force. Finally, Mr. Carrington set down his fork, his gaze lifting to meet Jasmine's. The room fell silent, guests holding their breath, sensing that something significant was unfolding. "Jasmine," he said, his voice steady but carrying a weight it had never had before, "I have been blind. I allowed my pride, my assumptions, and my prejudices to cloud my judgment. You have not only demonstrated extraordinary skill, but you have shown unwavering dignity, courage, and heart in the face of constant challenge. For that I owe you my respect." Jasmine felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. She had worked for this acknowledgement for years, but hearing it spoken aloud, directly from the man who had so long denied her value, was profoundly moving. "Thank you, sir," she replied softly, her voice steady despite the emotion swelling within her. "All I've ever wanted is to do my work with care and pride." Timothy's eyes sparkled with pride, and he spoke up, his youthful voice ringing with conviction. "Dad, she's more than earned it. Jasmine has shown us what talent and heart really mean. We should all respect and appreciate her, not just for her cooking, but for who she is." Mr. Carrington's expression softened, a rare smile tugging at his lips. He glanced at his son, then back at Jasmine, a deep understanding settling in his eyes. "You are right, Timothy, and you are right, Jasmine. I have been wrong. I let my arrogance and assumptions overshadow what truly matters. From this day forward, you will have not only my respect but my trust." The room seemed to exhale collectively. Guests murmured in quiet approval, and the atmosphere shifted from tension to warmth. Jasmine felt a profound sense of relief and validation, not just for herself, but for the invisible struggles she had carried for so long. Her skill, dedication, and integrity had transcended prejudice and hierarchy, earning recognition in the most direct and meaningful way. As the luncheon continued, Jasmine moved among the guests with quiet grace, serving dishes, answering questions, and witnessing the respect that now accompanied her every action. She noticed the subtle glances of acknowledgement from previously skeptical staff and guests alike, each one a small victory, a ripple in the long-standing currents of expectation and bias within the household. After the luncheon, Timothy caught Jasmine alone in the kitchen. "You did it," he whispered, his voice filled with awe and admiration. "You didn't just cook a meal, you changed hearts and minds. You've shown Dad and all of us what real courage and talent look like." Jasmine smiled, a genuine warmth spreading through her chest. "We did it together, Timothy. Your support and belief gave me strength when I doubted myself." That evening, as Jasmine finally returned to her quarters, she reflected on the week's events. The journey had been exhausting, filled with fear, anxiety, and constant scrutiny. Yet every challenge, every moment of doubt, had been an opportunity to assert her worth and humanity. She realized that her role in the Carrington mansion had transformed, from an invisible worker to a recognized and respected individual whose skill and heart could not be ignored. Mr. Carrington approached her door quietly. Later that night, a rare, unguarded moment. "Jasmine," he said, voice softer than ever, "I want to apologize once more. I was wrong, and I see that now. Your talent and your integrity have earned my respect and my gratitude." Jasmine nodded, emotion welling within her. "Thank you, sir. That means more than words can express." Timothy, standing nearby, beamed. "See, Dad? She's extraordinary, and now everyone knows it." Mr. Carrington's stern expression softened completely, and he placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "Yes," he said quietly. "Yes, she is." In that moment, the Carrington mansion felt transformed. Walls built from pride, wealth, and expectation had begun to crack, allowing respect, understanding, and humanity to shine through. Jasmine, exhausted but triumphant, realized that her journey was about far more than cooking. It was about courage, dignity, and the quiet power of heart and skill. She had earned more than recognition. She had earned a place of respect, a bond with Timothy, and the knowledge that truth, talent, and integrity could overcome even the strongest prejudices. And as she finally closed her eyes that night, the mansion silent around her, Jasmine felt a profound sense of peace. The battles she had fought, the courage she had shown, and the heart she had poured into her work had all culminated in this moment of validation, connection, and lasting change. She had faced power, prejudice, and judgment, and emerged not just victorious but respected, seen and valued for who she truly was.